Welcome back, Goblin. Today we are going to be learning how to parse as a rogue in Gruul's Lair. Gruul's Lair, of course, is the first 25-man raid that your guild is probably going to get down, but after you get comfortable killing Gruul's Lair and you have it on farm, you're probably going to want to push your parses a little bit higher. Maybe go for those orange or at least high purple parses. So what I want to do is show you guys some tricks on exactly how to do that. If you haven't already, make sure you go check me out on Twitch over at twitch.tv/apoptosis808, as well as subscribe to my YouTube for more rogue content. Let's get into it, guys. Alright, so for your High King parse, basically it's very strategy dependent. So depending on how your guild wants to run and clear High King, you can either probably parse an orange parse without doing very well at all, or maybe even a high purple. Again, it depends on the strategy. So what you're about to see is the strategy that you guys are going to want to use if you want to try to push those parse numbers even higher. So this is like a burn High King strategy. So essentially the way that High King Mulgar fight is supposed to be done is you take out the adds one at a time until eventually you kill High King Mulgar himself. The thing is, though, you can actually zerg down High King Mulgar, and as soon as he dies, the parse ends. So the faster your parse is, the higher kind of burst damage that you're able to do, the better your numbers are going to be. So for this strategy, this is our first time actually killing High King Mulgar first, and even with kind of a scuffed run, honestly, I die right after High King goes down, but again, it doesn't really matter because in terms of parses, the parse ends when High King dies, even if all the other adds are up. So let's take a look and see how that goes. So you can see we're about to pull. We actually want to essentially pop Bloodlust almost immediately as we go in here. We do wait a few seconds. Again, people weren't really exactly sure how this was going to go, but you can see that Bloodlust gets popped here in just a second. As soon as it does, as a rogue, again, you want to pop all of your cooldowns. You want to be using your Flask, of course, Adrenaline Rush, Blade Flurry. I have my Trinket that's popped at the same time, and a Haste Potion as well. So we're just doing all of that here. You can see we're actually #1 DPS right now with the Cleave. I think that our damage was a little bit lacking in order to do the burn strat. So typically, the fastest that you can get this guy down is like right after his Whirlwind is finished. So we took a little bit longer, but even still, we're able to kill him in I think like a minute and a half, which by far is not the fastest that's possible for sure, but it's fast enough to get an orange parse. You can see, I'll show you the parse after this one is done. We're able to get a 96. It's pretty simple here. Just try to hit your cooldowns, make sure you keep slice and dice up. Besides that, not too much going on. Again, you can see there's still a lot of mistakes that are happening here. I got feared away because there's nobody on the Warlock boss at the moment, and we took a little bit of AoE damage. So, like I mentioned, I die like right as High King dies, but even with that happening, I can show you guys the parse for this one. We were able to get a 96, so this run of doing High King and Gruul were my best parses so far. I was able to get a 96. Obviously, there's still a lot that can be fine-tuned there, but if you want to push that number any higher, that's going to be very dependent on your guild and how quickly everyone can kill that boss. So the faster you can kill High King first, the higher number that you're going to be able to get, and maybe you can go for that 99 or even 100 if you guys are fast enough. Alright, so you've got your High King parse, and now you guys have moved on to Gruul. Gruul is really a fight for rogues where you want to have as high of an uptime as possible. It's actually fairly difficult for melee to do a lot of damage in this fight, but it's not impossible, and I think rogues are actually in the best position to do that. You'll see what I mean here in just a bit. Gruul, if you guys aren't familiar, of course, is the last boss of Gruul's Lair. He gets a damage buff every 15-30 seconds or so, and his big mechanic that people worry about is he does what's called a ground slam and a shatter. So basically, once every, it's like roughly a minute or so, he'll slam the ground, knock everybody back in a random direction, which is pretty key. And then after 5 seconds, you're slowed the whole time, you'll turn into a statue, and if you have anybody nearby you, you'll deal damage to each other, and that can possibly just be a wipe. So, the key things that you want to make sure you're getting on Gruul, and as a rogue, again, we're in a very good spot to kind of circumvent this, is making sure that you end your shatter in a good spot where, number one, you're going to be not doing damage to anyone or as little damage as possible to anybody, and number two, where you can get back onto the boss as quickly as possible. So if you want to be doing really big numbers versus Gruul, you have to compete against ranged DPS who don't have nearly as much downtime on the boss as we do. So let's just go ahead and take a look and see how this run goes. So we're about to pull. You want to run in right after the tank, essentially. Now, this boss does have a Hateful Strikes mechanic, which means that the second highest threat is going to occasionally take a really big amount of damage, so you obviously want to make sure that you're not anywhere near that. And then, until the shatter happens, essentially the only mechanic you have to worry about is those, like, falling spots. Basically, there will be a little AoE that happens around Gruul. You just have to move out of that. Depending on how your guild, your guild's clear time, what's the relative damage, how quickly you can do it, you want to typically save, make sure at least you have your cooldowns up for Bloodlust. But depending on when your guild's going to Bloodlust for this boss, you might be able to squeeze in that quick Blade Flurry and Haste Potion right at the beginning. Of course, we're buffed up with some regular stuff, but here's the shatter, right? So rogues, as I mentioned before, rogues are in a really good spot. Let's actually pause this. I'm gonna rewind it just a touch because I want to kind of note that especially. So rogues are in a really, really good spot to deal with shatter, more so than I think almost any other class. Maybe paladins could do it equally as well. But every time he shatters, you should have, every time he ground slams here, pop your Cloak of Shadows, you no longer have that slow. So you're able to reposition much easier. You see, I'm able to get to a spot that's relatively close to the boss and is away from everyone else. You can see that range check right there. This is really key. Rogues should be able to get back into the boss before almost any melee, even without sprint. Something to note, though, is even though you have cloaked the slow, you will still deal damage to people that are near you. So you still need to make sure that you're not near anybody. Depending on what your tanks are doing, your tanks should be going as close as possible to Gruul as they can when the ground slam happens. So you don't usually want to get back in there and start damaging, because you could end up wiping the raid if you kill those tanks. Depends again on how you guys are doing it. If you are able to get back in there and deal damage, sometimes maybe you could, if you don't get thrown too far away, you could attack them while the shatter's still ongoing and still do pretty well. So the rest of this here is just going to be essentially the rest of the fight. It's a rinse and repeat. You want to save cooldowns for Bloodlust. You want to use them as soon as you can, and just have as much uptime on the boss as possible without letting Slice and Dice fall. Your, of course, combo spender is going to be Rupture. Rupture in Burning Crusade, it does do a bit better than Eviscerate unless you have the extra combo points at the time to do like an Eviscerate. If you've got Rupture going and you have Slice and Dice, you can go ahead and Eviscerate. And of course, we're wanting to use Deadly Poison on our offhand weapon, as that deals sometimes even more damage than Rupture, depending on how many points in Vile Poison. So again here, this was like almost a little bit of a bad situation for me. We do sprint away, and we are able to find a spot that's not actually gonna hurt anybody. So if you get shattered back, definitely Cloak of Shadows and sprint. Don't be afraid to sprint and run across the room. You have 6 seconds to find a spot where you're going to be dealing as little damage as possible to other people, and then just get right back in there and start damaging again. But essentially, this fight is just a rinse and repeat. I do screw up here at the end. I don't have my sprint available, and I thought I was able to get to a spot where I was going to be safe. But you'll see right at about, I think like 10% or so, I actually died to the shatter. I popped my Cloak of Shadows, but I wasn't able to find a spot that wasn't near like a couple of other people, which is my bad. I should have ran the opposite direction, looking back at it. But even with that, even with dying at 10%, this fight for me, we were able to parse a 96, which is still in that orange, which is the nice color that we want to see. I think without dying at the end, I maybe could have possibly even gotten up to like a 98, maybe a 99. I don't think this was a 99 run. My damage looks like it's just lacking a little bit too much for it to be a 99. But besides that, I mean, we can talk a little bit about like your consumables. That should be pretty no-brainer, though. Yeah, I think actually this is where I die. Is this where I die? Maybe. Yeah. So actually, you can see that that's pretty early on there. That was like, yeah, 15%. So even dying at 15%, which I'm just kicking myself so badly because I think we could have gotten a really high parse off of this one. We were able to get. I'll pull up that parse again. We were able to get a 96. So this is my best overall, but this was my best overall one. So I think this would have been a really high parse if I hadn't died. But let me break it down just so that you guys have a few things to focus on for this fight. Number one, Cloak of Shadows every time that you get ground slammed so that you don't have the slow. Number two, you have the most ability to position yourself, so try to get as far away from people as possible, or make sure that you're not near anyone, so you're not dealing damage to them. Number three, you want to make sure that you're timing all of your cooldowns with Bloodlust. If you can, you really want to be using those short cooldowns as soon as the fight starts, once the tanks have established aggro, depending on when you guys are going to be bloodlusting or using heroism for the entire fight. And then number four, just make sure you've got all your consumes. Make sure you're popping those haste potions. I had some scrolls going on this as well. And yeah, just make sure that you're kind of mentally prepared to go at it, and you're just trying to keep your uptime. This is really a fight where the more uptime you have on this boss, the better you're going to be doing. We actually had a DST drop for this one, which I did not win, so very sad for me. But that's essentially all I'm going to be talking about for this one, guys. Gruul's Lair is not extremely difficult to parse as a rogue. Again, High King, it more so depends on what your guild strategy is. And for Gruul himself, as so long as you can keep your uptime at just the highest that you can, and you've prepared everything else with your consumables and your buffs, you should be able to get into a 96 or higher parse with no issues. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. I'll be doing a Mag Theridens guide soon. I've had a lot of scuffed Mag Theridens parses. The highest I've been able to get right now is like an 89, but that's mainly due from a few mistakes that I've been making. But I'll look out for you guys in the next one. Again, check me out on Twitch. I'll be live at twitch.tv/apoptosis808. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.